In the deepest places on Earth, where sunlight dies and pressure crushes titanium like paper, something is listening. Between 1963 and 1968, the ocean floor didn't just claim ships, it claimed an entire generation of technology. It became a graveyard that swallowed four of the world's most advanced submarines from four different nations: American, Soviet, Israeli, French. Nearly 500 men vanished into the crushing dark. But the darkness claimed more than just lives. It claimed the truth. In the silence between the sonar pings, acoustic sensors picked up sounds that the laws of physics cannot explain. We are told these vessels were lost to accidents, to mechanical failures, to bad welds and battery explosions. But the declassified archives tell a different story. 0 feet sea level. This is not a story about drowning. Drowning implies a struggle. At these depths, there is no struggle. There is only the math of implosion. A submarine hull is a bubble of air fighting the weight of the entire world. When that bubble fails, biology ends, history ends, and the abyss begins. Chapter 1: The Thresher Depth, 2,400 feet. The Crush Zone. April 10th, 1963. The USS Thresher. She was the pride of the United States Navy, the first of her class. A hunter-killer designed to be quieter, deeper, and deadlier than anything the Soviets could put in the water. She was 278 feet of nuclear-powered arrogance. On the morning of April 10th, 220 miles east of Cape Cod, she prepared for a test that would push her to her absolute limit. Test depth: 1,300 feet. On the surface, the rescue ship Skylark waited. The mood was routine. Inside the Thresher, 129 men were going about their morning. Coffee was brewing in the mess. In the control room, Lieutenant Commander Wes Harvey watched the depth gauge. At 9:09 a.m., the routine ended. A pipe, no wider than a man's arm, failed in the engine room. It was a silver brazed joint, a soldering technique that would later be banned. But on this morning, it was the weak link. High-pressure seawater, entering at 600 pounds per square inch, didn't just leak. It screamed. It sprayed into the engine room with the force of a water jet cutter, blasting through electrical panels. The reactor's scram safety system detected the water and did exactly what it was designed to do. It shut down. The nuclear heart of the Thresher went cold. The propeller stopped. The submarine was now just a heavy steel tube, getting heavier by the second as water flooded in. Commander Harvey gave the order to blow main ballast. This is the emergency brake. High-pressure air forces the water out of the tanks, making the sub light enough to shoot to the surface. But physics played a cruel trick. As the high-pressure air expanded into the pipes, it cooled rapidly. It cooled so fast that the moisture in the air flash froze. Ice formed in the strainers. In seconds, the emergency blow system clogged with its own ice. The hissing stopped. The Thresher was now falling. At 9:17 a.m., the Skylark received a final, garbled transmission. Experiencing minor difficulties. Have positive up angle. Attempting to blow. And then, the sound that haunts naval history. At 2,400 feet, the hull of the Thresher reached its crush depth. The ocean pushed in with 5,500 pounds of pressure on every single inch of steel. The collapse happened in 40 milliseconds. To understand this horror, you must understand biology. The human brain takes about 100 milliseconds to process pain. It takes 200 milliseconds to register a sound. The crew of the Thresher did not drown. They did not suffer. One moment, they were standing in the control room, fighting to save their ship. In less than half the time it takes to blink, the air inside the hull was compressed until it ignited like a diesel engine. They were incinerated and crushed before their brains could even register that the hull had failed. But the horror didn't end with the implosion. 24 hours later, the USS Seawolf arrived to search. They lowered their sonar listening devices into the black water, and they heard knocking. Clang. Dish. Clang. Clang. 3 distinct beats. The universal signal for survivors. The sonar operators froze. It was impossible. At that depth, everyone was dead. The hull was in shreds. Yet, for hours, the banging continued. Was it a survivor, trapped in an air pocket, miles deep, waiting for a rescue that couldn't come? Navy analysis later concluded the sound was likely the twisted fuselage of the submarine settling into the mud, the metal groaning as it cooled. But tell that to the men who wore the headphones. Tell that to the sailors who sat in the silence, listening to the dead ship speaking to them from the abyss. Chapter 2. The Dakar, the Cruel Signal Depth. 9,800 feet. The Midnight Zone. If the Thresher was a tragedy of physics, the Dakar was a tragedy of mystery. January 1968. The Israeli submarine Dakar, a refurbished British T-class vessel, was making its maiden voyage from Portsmouth to Haifa. On board were unidentified men. They were bringing the ship home to a young nation that desperately needed naval strength. The Mediterranean in winter is a violent place. Storms turned the sea into a washing machine of gray swells. But the Dakar was tough. She checked in every 6 hours like clockwork. Until January 25th. Midnight. The radio room in Haifa waited. The silence stretched. 1 minute past midnight. 10 minutes. An hour. Dakar, this is Haifa Control. Report position. Nothing but static. And then, the hope began. And hope, in this case, was a weapon. 2 days after the disappearance, a station in Cyprus picked up a signal. It was faint, buried in the atmospheric noise. But it was distinct. Morse code. The operators leaned in. DAK. The call sign of the Dakar. It wasn't just a burst. It was sustained. The signal appeared again and again, and again. It was sloppy, the rhythm off, as if sent by a man who was injured. Or terrified. And it were running out of air. The Israeli Navy scrambled everything. Destroyers, aircraft, merchant vessels. They triangulated the signal. They raced toward the coordinates, believing that 69 men were bobbing on the surface, waiting to be saved. They arrived at the source of the signal. And they found empty water. No oil slick. No debris. No submarine. The signal stopped. Years later, investigation revealed a sickening possibility. The signals were likely a hoax. A cruel prank by a radio operator somewhere in the region, mimicking the distress call of a dying ship. Or perhaps, an atmospheric anomaly that sounded like a voice. While the fleet chased ghosts, the Dakar was already gone. She had plunged 9,800 feet down, settling on the silt between Crete and Cyprus. It took 31 years to find her. In 1999, a robotic search team finally illuminated the hull. The Dakar was broken in half, but the discovery raised more questions. The emergency buoy, a device designed to float to the surface and mark the crash site, was found miles away, washed up on a beach in Gaza, a year after the crash. The release mechanism showed it hadn't been deployed automatically. It had been released or ripped away. The wreckage tells us the Dakar flooded catastrophically, but the fake signals remains one of the coldest unsolved crimes of the sea. Who sat by a radio, listening to a nation panic, and decided to tap out a lie? Chapter 3, K-129, the CIA's greatest heist depth, 16,500 feet, the Abyssal Plain, March, 1968, the Pacific Ocean. The Cold War is freezing. The Soviet submarine K-129 goes silent. She is carrying 3 ballistic nuclear missiles, 1 megaton each, enough to vaporize the entire west coast of the United States. When she misses her check-ins, the Soviet fleet panics. They launch a massive search. But they are looking in the wrong place. They don't know where their own submarine is, but the Americans do. The U.S. Navy's secret listening system, SOSUS, heard the K-129 die. They heard the catastrophic explosion, the sound of bulkheads collapsing as the sub spiraled down 16,500 feet. While the Soviets searched the surface, the U.S. Navy quietly plotted the coordinates. And then, the CIA hatched the most audacious plot in intelligence history. Project Azorian. The goal: steal the submarine. To do it, they needed a cover story. The CIA asked billionaire Howard Hughes to build a ship, the Glomar Explorer. The cover story? They were mining the ocean floor for manganese nodules, potato-sized rocks rich in minerals. The press bought it. The public bought it. Even the Soviets bought it. But beneath the Glomar Explorer was a giant mechanical claw. A claw designed to reach down 3 miles, grab a 2,000-ton Soviet submarine, and lift it to the surface without breaking it. In 1974, the claw grabbed the K-129. They began the lift, inch by inch, the steel groaning under the tension. But halfway up, disaster struck. The claws cracked. The submarine broke apart. 2/3 of the vessel, including the nuclear missiles and the code books, slipped back into the abyss. The CIA only recovered the bow section. But inside that bow section were bodies. 6 Soviet sailors. The Americans did something unexpected. They gave their enemies a formal military burial. They played the Soviet anthem. They committed the bodies to the deep with full honors. But the intelligence report noted something disturbing. When divers examined the wreckage, they found the missile hatch. It was damaged. Not from the outside, but from the inside. The evidence suggested that in the final moments, someone inside the K-129 was trying to manually override the launch sequence. Was it a rogue captain trying to start World War III? Or a desperate crew trying to jettison a missile that was about to explode? The men who know are lying 3 miles down. Chapter 4. The Scorpion, the Silence of the Admiral's Death. 11,000 feet, May 1968. The Atlantic. The USS Scorpion is coming home. The crew called her Scrapper-on. She was old. She was tired. She had a list of mechanical issues a mile long. On May 22nd, she vanished near the Azores. The Navy publicly launched a frantic search. Families stood on the docks in Norfolk, Virginia, scanning the horizon, praying for their husbands and fathers to appear. But this was a lie. The Navy didn't need to search. They knew she was dead before the families were even notified. Deep in a secret bunker, Dr. John Craven, the Navy's chief scientist for deep submergence, was looking at a piece of paper. It was a printout from hydrophones thousands of miles away. It showed a bubble pulse. When a submarine implodes, the air bubble collapses, then bounces back, then collapses again. It creates a rhythmic frequency that is undeniable. Craven calculated the exact spot. He drew a circle on the map. He told the admirals, "She's here." He was right. The wreckage lies in 11,000 feet of water. The hull is telescoped, shoved into itself like a collapsed spyglass. The official theory? A battery exploded, incapacitating the crew, and the sub sank until it imploded. But there is another theory, the hot run. Some evidence suggests a torpedo accidentally activated inside the tube. The propeller started spinning. The engine ignited. The temperature inside the torpedo room would have skyrocketed in seconds. The crew, in a panic, tried to execute a 180-degree turn, a turn back to trigger the failsafe that shuts down a rogue torpedo. They didn't make it. What chills the blood is not the accident. It is the silence of the admirals. For weeks they let families hope. They let ships sail in grid patterns, all while the classified chart in Dr. Craven's office marked the exact tomb of 99 men. Conclusion: the Quackers, the unknown. 4 submarines. 4 tragedies. But the ocean had one more mystery for the Cold War sailors. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Soviet submarine crews began reporting something. They called them quackers. In the North Atlantic, sonar operators would hear a sound. Not a whale, not a ship. And quack, 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 quack. It sounded like a giant mechanical frog, but it moved at speeds of 200 knots, faster than any torpedo. It would circle the submarines. It would follow them. And then, just as quickly, it would vanish into the deep. Soviet commanders were terrified. Was it a new American weapon? A secret drone? For decades, it was the greatest ghost story of the underwater world. Years later, scientists would claim they solved it. They said it was the Antarctic minke whale, making a call no one had ever catalogued. But ask the old sonar operators. They will tell you that whales don't circle nuclear submarines at 200 miles per hour. They will tell you that the ocean is vast, and we have explored less than 5 of it. The Thresher is still there. The Scorpion is still there. The nuclear warheads of the K-129 are still there, ticking away their half-lives in the dark. The ocean is a keeper of secrets. It swallows our steel, our nuclear fire, and our bravest men. And in return, it gives us silence. So the next time you look at the blue surface of the sea, remember, it is just a curtain. And behind the curtain, in the pressure and the cold, the ghosts of 1968 are still waiting.